Yes, I just like to explain a little bit to the audience what I mean by myth in this case, because I'm really talking about myth as geopolitics, not just myth as myth. This isn't a philosophical account. This is myth as geopolitics. And what I mean by that Trump is to a certain extent become mythic is in two categories. One is his extraordinary ability to dominate the discourse around the world, globally. Who is everyone talking about? Trump. He does this through the force of his personality, he claims. And that's why he does it. And you cannot any longer go on thinking of Trump as just being a standard political figure, a sort of, narcissistic politician of the kind which we see all the time. There is a quality that is different. For one thing, I mean, he has just, everything has been thrown at him. Any normal human being would be laid flat or gone off into retirement. He survives, and he comes back still invigorating.
Crooke argues that Trump isn't just a narcissistic politician, but a mythic figure. What does that mean? Think about it. No matter what scandal hits him, lawsuits, impeachments, even January 6th, Trump keeps coming back. Any ordinary politician would have retired in shame. But Trump turns every attack into fuel. That's what Crooke means by myth. Carl Jung wrote in the 1930s that certain leaders tap into the collective unconscious. They embody archetypes, larger-than-life roles that people instinctively recognize. For Trump, it has the archetype of the outsider king, the one man who believes only he can save the nation. And millions believe him. For Americans, this is crucial. Trump isn't just campaigning for the White House. He's shaping the global stage as a living myth. That makes him unpredictable, more powerful, and potentially far more dangerous than a normal political actor.
The actual conditions of Israel's hold, what hold it has over Trump and his imagination. A hold that Trump seems impelled to normalize the genocide that is taking place there, within the Western sphere, to make it seem normal, to seem justified. The massacre of women and children taking place before our eyes. Qualms about this are quashed. We are not allowed to complain. We do, in effect, become complicit and indeed accountable for these acts nonetheless, because of their normalization into our societies. Bloodlust in Gaza has been awakened not by Wotan, but instead by something quite different. Yossi Klein.
This is where Crooke delivers perhaps his harshest warning. Trump's myth doesn't just stay inside the US. It extends to Israel and Gaza. According to Crooke, Trump feels compelled to normalize what the world is witnessing in Gaza, the mass killing of civilians, women, and children. Think about how powerful that statement is. Normally, atrocities spark outrage. But Crooke says we're seeing the opposite. They're being normalized. That means Western governments, including Washington, are making genocide appear acceptable, even justified. For Americans, that should be alarming. Because when we normalize crimes abroad, we erode our own moral compass at home. What happens to a society when massacres no longer shock us? What happens when political myths are used to justify bloodshed? That's not just a Middle East problem. It's a warning about the direction of Western civilization itself.
Does Netanyahu have any interest in making a deal to release the hostages, or is his steadfast goal the utter genocide, destruction, or removal of all Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, no matter what the public reaction might be?
Well, he does, and he has a positive public reaction within Israel. But I wanted just to say that, we have to, look on this also without a sort of superiority to it. James Hillman, in his book, A Terrible Love of War, attempted to address bloodlust, an impulse so terrible, yet one that ignites a Mars-like fury that bonds men in battle. I felt like a god, says General Patton in the eponymous film. The general walks the field after a battle, churned earth, burnt tanks, dead men. He takes up a dying officer, kisses him, surveys the havoc and says, I love it. God help me. I do love it so. I love it more than life. So we have to, I'm just saying this to underline more than anything, the power of these sort of myths in creating these lusts for killing and for it. Not justifying it, I'm just explaining that simply societies have found and continue to find meaning in life through war. Israel is doing this somehow to find meaning from its biblical roots, its myths from the biblical in the churned desolation that it is visited in Gaza. But this is a profoundly dangerous impulse.
Crooke quotes James Hillman, "Societies find meaning through war." That sounds insane, but let's be honest. History proves it. Ancient empires glorified conquest. Europe found unity in centuries of war. And the US? We've lived through 2 decades of the war on terror. For some Americans, that endless conflict became the background music of their lives. Crooke is telling us that Israel is doing the same, finding meaning in biblical myths, using war as a way to validate its identity. But here's the frightening part. When a society convinces itself that war is its purpose, peace becomes impossible. For viewers in the US and UK, the question is simple. Have we also fallen into this trap? Are our constant interventions, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, now Ukraine, really about strategy? Or are we feeding a deeper cultural addiction to war? Crooke suggests it's the latter. And if he's right, then our foreign policy is being driven by psychology.
This, no doubt, will be a biblical explanation, but clearly the ancient but still potent image of the Antichrist is now in the air. This is what Macron had to say, quote, exactly. Putin has been a constant destabilizing force, he said. Russia has become a threat to many, including us. Now listen to this. It has to eat to survive. So he's a predator. That's Putin. A threat to many, including us. A cannibal at our doorstep. I'm not saying that France will be attacked tomorrow, but Putin, he's a threat to Europeans.
Oh my goodness.
Let's not be naive. Well, there it is. The imagery evoked of the beast at the door. The cannibal needing to eat.
I'm thinking of
very clear.
Not by logic. This part is shocking. Crooke highlights how leaders like Macron and Lindsey Graham describe Putin not as a rival politician, but as a monster. Macron called him a cannibal. Graham said we must crush Russia. That's not just rhetoric, it's myth-making. Once you label an enemy a beast, compromise is impossible. It transforms geopolitics into holy war. Crooke warns that this kind of language is more dangerous than nuclear weapons because it shapes public psychology. Remember Iraq in 2003? Saddam was painted as a new Hitler. Weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist were turned into myth. And the result? A disastrous war that cost trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of lives. We're watching the same playbook unfold again, this time with Russia. For Western audiences, this is the big takeaway. When your leaders start talking about enemies as monsters, you should prepare for escalation.
The Russians treated Trump in a very respectful, courteous, and friendly fashion, despite all of the comments that come out of Washington and from Europe. I mean, some of them extremely ugly, like the ones from Macron. Less noticed, perhaps, but psychologically crucial, is that Trump seemed to recognize in Putin a fellow from the pantheon of putative, mythic leaders, also Apollonian, perhaps, rather than Diocenes for Trump. Yet how striking, unlike it was, the treatment of Putin by Trump, and also Putin's treatment of Trump, to Trump's completely disdainful treatment of the Euros, treating them like sniveling children.
Crooke makes a fascinating observation. Putin treated Trump with respect, almost as a fellow mythic leader. Meanwhile, Trump treated European leaders with contempt, as if they were children. That dynamic reveals a lot. Trump doesn't see politics as diplomacy. He sees it as a stage for alpha leaders to test each other. Putin earned his respect. Europe, not so much. For Americans, this matters because it hints at how Trump might run foreign policy if he returns to the White House. Would he pivot away from NATO toward a world defined by strongmen cutting personal deals? Crooke suggests that's exactly how Trump views geopolitics, not as alliances, but as rival myths clashing for dominance.
The Iranians are preparing for a conflict, preparing very urgently because they suspect that Israel is preparing urgently because Israel fears that the Chinese are sending advanced air defense weapons to Iran, which they probably are. And so both sides are moving very quickly. I believe there are big changes taking place in Iran, big shifts taking place at all levels, and that it is getting ready. And I don't know that it will necessarily await on Israel the choice on timing of a conflict. The language that is being used from the Supreme Leader is very clear. He thinks this is a waste of time to talk to the Americans or to the Europeans because they are simply trying to trick us. And he sees this as the inevitable big conflict is coming, and it's coming quite soon.
Finally, Crooke warns that Iran is preparing for a massive conflict, not about nukes, but about survival. He says Israel and Iran are both rushing to prepare for war, and that new, advanced weapons may be unveiled in the process. For Americans, this should set off alarms. A US-Iran conflict would be far bigger than Iraq or Afghanistan. It would spike oil prices, drag in global powers like China and Russia, and potentially unleash a regional war across the Middle East. Crooke's point is chilling. We're not looking at isolated crises. Trump as a myth, Gaza as normalized genocide, Russia as the cannibal beast, Iran preparing for war. They are all part of the same pattern. A world drifting away from rational politics and into myth-driven confrontation. And once those myths take hold, history shows us they're almost impossible to stop. So where does this leave us? Alastair Crooke paints a picture of a world sliding into chaos, not because of strategy, but because of myth. Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, they're no longer just politicians. They've become symbols, archetypes, and myths driving nations toward confrontation. The question for us, especially in America, is simple. Will we recognize these myths before they drag us into another catastrophic war? What do you think? Is Trump's myth a strength that makes America unbreakable, or is it a danger that could ignite global conflict? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's start the debate. And if you found this breakdown valuable, hit subscribe, because we're going to keep exposing the stories behind the headlines that mainstream media want to tell you.